Stop blaming your precious little sister, you pathetic bully, my parents yelled. After my sister stole my mom's brand new SUV and wrecked it, then demanded I pay for it, so I went nuclear. Hey Reddit. So I woke up to missing keys and an empty driveway, because peace was never an option in this house. By noon, my family wanted me to commit a felony, so my sister could stay the favorite. I, 32 male, work auto claims. Mostly, I listen to people swear they barely tapped it, while describing a car that looks like it fought a bear. 8 years of that teaches you one thing. I screenshot stuff when I can smell a story changing. That skill came in handy the morning I woke up and my car keys were gone. Saturday, October, Midwest suburb, the kind where everyone knows each other's business, but pretends they don't. For the record, I wasn't living in my parents' basement. I moved back in short term during busy season to save money and cut my commute. I paid rent, paid utilities, and kept my stuff locked up because my sister treats ownership like a suggestion. I'd been looking forward to sleeping past 7 a.m. for the first time in 2 weeks because we just finished a nightmare month of back-to-back claims from a hailstorm that hit 3 counties. My eyes cracked open at 8:22 a.m. Hand reached for my dresser where I keep my keys, wallet, phone. Same spot every night. When something isn't where it should be, I notice immediately. Wallet, phone, no keys. I sat up, checked again, checked the floor, checked my jacket from the night before. Nothing. My heart started doing that thing where it knows something's wrong before your brain catches up. Quick context, my car had been in the shop for a week with transmission issues, parts on backorder. The only drivable vehicle at the house was Mom's brand new 2023 SUV, and I kept her spare key on my keyring because she kept misplacing hers. I walked to the window and looked at the driveway. Empty. Just oil stains where Mom's SUV should have been sitting. Here's some more background so the rest makes sense. Mom bought that SUV about a month earlier and asked me to park it in the driveway because her depth perception was garbage. I'd said sure. She'd handed me the spare key, told me I was the only one she trusted not to curb it or scrape it backing out. That SUV was her pride and joy. 35 grand. Silver paint, leather seats, all the safety features. That new car smell she'd threatened to disown anyone who ate inside it for ruining. She'd been making payments on it for 4 weeks. Still owed about $29,000 on the loan. She showed it off to everyone. The neighbors, her co-workers, random people at the grocery store who'd compliment the color. She'd spent 2 years saving for the down payment. I stood there in my boxers and a faded t-shirt from some 5K I ran 6 years ago, staring at that empty space, and my brain assembled the puzzle pieces before I even wanted it to. Kayla, my 28-year-old sister, still lived at home. Bounced between part-time jobs like it was an Olympic sport. Hostess at 3 different restaurants in the past year. Retail during the holidays. Dog walker for about 6 weeks until she got bored. She had a track record of taking stuff that wasn't hers and expecting everyone else to deal with it. Kayla had a history, not, oops, I borrowed your hoodie history. More like, took my laptop and returned it cracked, then cried until I got blamed for being mean, disappeared my headphones, and somehow they reappeared as lost, right after she needed money. And every time, my parents acted like the real crime was me noticing. But this was different. This wasn't headphones or $80. My phone buzzed. Number I half recognized. I opened the text and felt my stomach drop through the floor. It was a photo of Mom's SUV wrapped around a wooden fence post off some back road. Front end completely destroyed. Hood crumpled up like someone had stepped on an aluminum can. Airbags blown. Glass everywhere. The timestamp said 5:47 a.m. Nicole, one of Kayla's friends I'd met maybe twice, had sent the crash photo. She must have gotten my number from Kayla's phone. Then Bree started contradicting her in a separate thread. One said everyone walked away fine. The other said Kayla's wrist was messed up pretty bad. I screenshotted both conversations because they were already rewriting the night, and neither seemed to realize I could see both versions playing out in real time on my screen. Pieced together! They'd gone to some birthday party at a lake house about 2 hours away. Some guy named Tyler who threw these big blowouts every year. Kayla had been up all night partying and insisted she was fine to drive everyone home at dawn instead of sleeping it off. Fell asleep at the wheel, drifted off the road, plowed through that fence into a drainage ditch. 8 years in claims taught me that the first version of the story is never the last. So I screenshotted everything. Not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted truth that couldn't be edited. Because I knew exactly what was about to happen. And I wanted to be ready for the show. Mom came downstairs around 9 a.m. I heard her shuffling around in the kitchen, making coffee, humming some song from the radio. Dad was already out back doing something with the lawnmower. Normal Saturday morning in our suburban nightmare. I walked into the kitchen, told her a car was gone. My keys were missing, and Kayla took one of the vehicles. She blinked at me. Your car? The car, I repeated. Someone needs to check the driveway. She didn't move, just sighed like I'd told her the milk was expired. Okay, so Kayla borrowed your car. She probably had somewhere to be. Why are you making this into a thing? I showed her the photos on my phone. She grabbed it from my hands, stared at the wreckage. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. A car wrapped around a fence post in a ditch somewhere. She squinted at the screen. What happened? Barely a whisper. I explained. Told her Kayla grabbed my whole keyring off my dresser while I was asleep around 11 p.m. the night before. Took whatever car was in the driveway. 2 hours to some party at a lake, crashed it coming back because she was exhausted from partying all night. And now the car was totaled. Dad came in through the back door, saw the scene, asked what was going on. Mom handed him the phone. He squinted at the photo, then looked at me with this weird tightening around his jaw that I'd seen 1,000 times before when Kayla was involved. This is your car? I didn't answer. He shook his head. Look, it's not great, but it's just a car. Your car. You've got insurance. Why are you making this into a federal case? Why are you doing this? Mom added. Making everyone upset over your vehicle? You're always looking for ways to make her look bad, Dad said. This better not be some kind of setup. I told him to call Nicole himself if he didn't believe me. Gave him the number. I didn't argue. I just let them talk, because they always tell on themselves when they think you'll fold. Then came the part I'd been waiting for my whole life. Mom shook her head slowly. Kayla wouldn't steal. You probably left the keys somewhere she could find them. Maybe you told her she could borrow your car and forgot. She paused. You've been tired from work. Maybe you're confused. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead my case. I just watched her say the words out loud like she couldn't hear herself. Dad was already on the phone with Nicole, but he wasn't asking questions. He was telling her what to say. So he gave her permission to take his car, right? She said he told her she could? I stayed quiet and let them hang themselves with their own excuses. Kayla showed up around 1 p.m. Turned out Nicole's boyfriend had driven out to pick them up from the ER after the crash. I heard her key in the lock. Heard her trying to sneak in without being noticed. That particular shuffle she did when she was hoping to slide past everyone and disappear into her room before anyone could ask questions. I recognized it immediately. Same move she'd pulled 100 times before. She looked rough. Makeup smeared under her eyes like a raccoon. Hair tangled with what might have been a leaf stuck in it. Clothes wrinkled and grass-stained from whatever field she'd ended up in. A splint on her left wrist, bruises up her forearm. She smelled like campfire smoke and that stale smell of someone who hasn't slept in way too long. Mom rushed to her immediately, pulled her into a hug before she could even put down her bag, asked if she was okay, where she'd been, what happened. The whole concerned mother routine while I stood in the doorway watching the script play out exactly as written. Kayla glanced at me over Mom's shoulder. I could see the gears turning. She was figuring out what story to tell, deciding how much we already knew. She pulled back from Mom. I stayed at a friend's house last night, borrowed a car to get there. Didn't mention the crash, didn't mention the totaled SUV. Just stood there looking tired and hoping that would be enough to make everyone stop asking questions. I held up my phone with the crash photo on the screen. Her face went white. Actually white. Like someone had drained the color out in real time. It's not what it looks like. Mom spun around, saw the photo again. Kayla, what is going on? I watched my sister pivot in real time. Watched her process the fact that I had evidence. Watched her search for an angle that would make her the victim in all this. He gave me permission. The words came out fast, practiced. I asked him last night if I could borrow his car, and he said yes. He left the keys out for me on purpose. And the accident wasn't even my fault. A deer ran across the road and I swerved. Dad's whole posture relaxed. See? It's his car. She had permission. This is between the two of you. Mom nodded, relieved. Exactly. Your car, your insurance, your problem. I don't know why you're dragging the whole family into this. Then Kayla pulled out her phone and turned to me. Tell them. Tell them you said yes. Go ahead. Tell Mom you gave me permission. Dad stepped closer. Just say it. Say you told her she could take it. This doesn't have to be a whole thing over your beat-up car. No. Not, I don't want to. Not, maybe later. Just no. I work claims. I know what fraud smells like. I said I was asleep. Said she took my keys from my dresser without asking sometime around 11 p.m., based on timestamps from her friend's texts. You're lying! Kayla's voice went shrill. You've always been jealous of me. You're always looking for ways to make me look bad. You're being cruel and unfair and vindictive. And here's the part that still makes me shake my head. Mom's expression softened. That mom brain kicking in again. Logic going right out the window. Why are you making such a big deal? It's your car. You have insurance. If you really loved this family, you'd stop trying to get your sister in trouble over your own vehicle. Dad nodded along. Exactly. Handle it yourself, file a claim, move on. I stayed quiet, let them finish. Then I asked Mom if she wanted to call the insurance company herself, or if she needed help with the phone number. The room went dead silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the kitchen wall. Dad laughed. Why would she call? It's your car. I kept my voice steady. My car's been in the shop for a week. Transmission issues. Parts on backorder. The only vehicle in the driveway last night was Mom's SUV. Mom's face flickered. No, she took your car. She said, she took my keys. My keys had Mom's spare on them. The spare I've been holding because Mom keeps losing hers. Mom shook her head hard. No, that's not. Bree said it was silver and new. Mom's SUV is silver and new. She wasn't hearing it. Grabbed her phone and called Bree herself. I watched her face as Bree confirmed she didn't know whose car it was. Just that it was silver. And new. And nice. Mom hung up. That proves nothing. I pulled up the photos from Nicole. Zoomed in on the license plate barely visible in the corner of the frame. Mom grabbed my phone. Stared at it. Her hands were shaking so hard the image was bouncing. Her plate. Her registration. Her car. That's my SUV? Yeah. The color drained from her face. $29,000 still owed. 4 weeks of payments on a car that was now scrap metal in a ditch 2 hours away. She turned on me. Not Kayla. Me. Immediately. Why didn't you tell us immediately? Why did you let us stand here thinking it was your car? You let this whole conversation happen knowing it was mine? I stared at her. I told you a car was missing. I showed you the photos. You decided it was mine because that was easier to dismiss. You should have been clearer. You should have... She stopped, swallowed. The reality was starting to land. Kayla backed up toward the wall. Started talking fast, words tumbling out in a panic. I didn't know. I thought it was his car. It was dark and I couldn't tell the difference. The keys were right there and I just assumed. Mom finally turned to look at her. I've never seen that expression on her face before. All that protective mom energy just vanished. Like a switch flipped and suddenly the person standing there wasn't her baby girl anymore. It was the person who'd just cost her $35,000. Mom's voice went cold. Why did you take any car without permission in the first place? Why did you go into someone's room at 11 p.m. and take their keys off their dresser? Why would you ever think that's acceptable behavior? Dad jumped in. Everyone needs to calm down. This is clearly a misunderstanding. We can sort it out as a family. The important thing is nobody got hurt. Same script he'd been reading from forever. Mom turned on him so fast I thought she might pull a muscle. Do you understand we still owe $29,000 on that car? Do you understand insurance might not cover anything because she's not on our policy? Do you understand your precious daughter just destroyed months of savings in one night of partying? Dad went quiet. That was new. Usually he doubled down. Kayla kept apologizing. Said she was sorry. Over and over. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm so sorry. Like a broken record that thought repetition would make everything go away. I went upstairs, locked my door, started transferring all the screenshots to a USB drive. Could hear them arguing through the floor. Could hear Kayla's voice getting higher and more desperate. Could hear Mom's voice getting sharper and colder. Could hear Dad trying to play peacemaker and failing miserably. Something had finally cracked. Anyway, insurance did what insurance does. Mom was on the phone with the insurance company for almost 6 hours over the next 3 days. The adjuster wasn't rude, just dead-eyed over the phone. Turns out when Mom set up the policy, she'd signed a named driver exclusion for Kayla to keep the premiums down. Kayla had 2 at-fault accidents on her record from her early 20s, and adding her would have jacked up the rate by 40%. So Mom checked the box that said Kayla would never operate the vehicle, ever, under any circumstances. In writing, signed and dated. I watched Mom's face when the adjuster read that clause back to her. That moment when she remembered signing it. When she realized she'd excluded her own daughter to save money. And now that decision had come back to eat her alive. The adjuster had seen this exact scenario play out dozens of times. Family member takes a car without permission, wrecks it. Everyone's shocked when insurance tells them to pound sand. Claim denied, no coverage, no exceptions, no appeals. Here's the financial damage in one brutal paragraph. $6,000 down payment, gone. $29,000 still owed on a ghost vehicle. Tow yard fees and storage charges stacking daily. Bank threatening legal action. Mom driving a 15-year-old sedan with 140,000 miles that rattled when it went over 55, while still paying for a car that didn't exist anymore. All because her golden child couldn't call an Uber. The first real blow-up happened 4 days after the crash. I came home from work to find both my parents waiting for me in the kitchen. Mom at the table with papers spread out in front of her. Dad standing with his arms crossed, face set in that expression he used when he was about to threaten something. He'd positioned himself between me and the hallway like they'd planned this ambush all afternoon. We need to talk about your responsibility in this situation. Dad didn't waste time. I set my bag down slowly, asked what responsibility he was referring to. Mom slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a breakdown of the costs, the remaining loan balance, the tow fees, the storage charges, the down payment, everything itemized in her neat handwriting with a total circled at the bottom. Your keys, she said. Your responsibility. If you'd kept them secured, none of this would have happened. Kayla wouldn't have been able to take the car in the first place. I stared at her. Asked if she was serious. Dad stepped closer. You left those keys where anyone could find them. You were careless. And now your mother is facing financial ruin because of your negligence. I told them my keys were on my dresser, in my room, at 11 p.m. while I was sleeping. Said the only way anyone could have taken them was by entering my room while I was asleep and physically removing them. Said that wasn't carelessness. That was theft. Stop blaming your precious little sister, you pathetic bully. Dad's voice went hard. She made a mistake. You made it possible. The fair thing is for you to help cover these costs since you're equally at fault. Mom nodded. We've talked about it. We think you should contribute at least half, $15,000 toward the loan, plus the storage fees that are still accumulating. That's when it hit me. They weren't just defending Kayla anymore. They were trying to make me pay for what she did. I asked them if they'd actually thought this through. Asked if they understood they were asking me to pay for a vehicle I never drove, never crashed, and never gave anyone permission to take. You need to think about your future in this family. Dad stepped even closer. We can still make this go away if you cooperate. Call the insurance company. Tell them you gave Kayla permission to drive your mother's car. Say it was a miscommunication and help cover the gap. He was asking me to commit insurance fraud and pay $15,000. To protect Kayla, I told him no. Told him what he was describing was a felony. Told him I wasn't going to prison or bankruptcy, so Kayla could avoid consequences for the 100th time. You're being selfish. You care more about being right than about this family. His face was red now. Maybe the reason she took the keys in the first place is because you made her feel like she couldn't ask you directly. You created an environment where she had to sneak around. I told him that was the most deranged logic I'd ever heard, and I was done discussing it. If you can't be part of the solution, maybe you should think about finding your own place to live. That threat hung in the air for about 3 seconds before I told him I'd already been thinking about it. Told him I'd start looking this weekend. Told him it would be nice to live somewhere where my belongings didn't disappear in the middle of the night and I didn't get invoiced for other people's disasters. Then I went upstairs, locked my door, and started browsing apartment listings. The next morning, I filed a police report. I'd been planning to just document it and leave it alone. Paper trail. Protect myself. But they had crossed a line. They hadn't just asked me to lie. They demanded I commit fraud and pay for damages I didn't cause. If they were willing to do that, I needed protection that was stronger than screenshots. I drove to the station, sat down with an officer, and gave a statement about what happened. The theft of my keyring, the unauthorized use of the vehicle, the crash. I also told him my parents were pressuring me to make false statements to the insurance company and demanding I pay restitution for their losses. All of it documented and on record with timestamps and witness contacts. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes, not because I wanted her arrested, because my family had made it clear that love meant I was supposed to sacrifice my career, my freedom, and my savings to protect Kayla from herself. That's not love. That's extortion with a family photo on the wall. 3 days later, a detective called the house to follow up. Suddenly, everyone cared about family again. Kayla came unglued. She'd been served notice that she was being investigated for vehicle theft and reckless operation. Not arrested, not yet, but the wheels were turning. She screamed at me in the hallway, called me a monster, said I was trying to ruin her life over one mistake. I told her one mistake was grabbing the wrong coffee order. This was a series of choices, and now the state was involved because our parents tried to make me commit a felony and empty my savings to clean up her mess. Mom stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, face gray. She didn't defend Kayla this time. Didn't defend Dad either. Didn't mention the $15,000 anymore. Just stood there looking like she'd aged 10 years in a week. Dad tried the peacemaker routine again. Told everyone to calm down. Said we could still fix this if I dropped the charges and reconsidered helping with the costs. I told him I wasn't dropping anything or paying anything. Told him he'd pushed me into this corner by demanding I commit fraud and subsidize Kayla's consequences, and now he could watch the fallout unfold. Then I went back to my room and started packing boxes. I found an apartment 2 weeks later. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Signed the lease on a Friday. Spent the weekend moving my stuff out while my parents watched with this weird mix of anger and disbelief. Kayla tried to talk to me while I was loading boxes into my car. Stood in the driveway blocking my path like we were about to have some big dramatic moment. Are you really doing this? You're abandoning the family over a mistake? Her voice cracked. I offered to pay mom back and nobody will give me a chance. And that police report? I could get in real trouble if the charges go through. I set down the box I was carrying and looked at her. Really looked at her. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was unwashed. She looked like someone who was starting to realize the safety net had disappeared. Told her it wasn't a mistake. Said a mistake is grabbing the wrong coat at a restaurant. Taking someone's keys at 11 p.m. while they're asleep, driving their car 2 hours to a party, and crashing it because you were too tired to keep your eyes open is a series of choices. One after another, after another. Said she made those choices, and now she was facing the consequences, and I wasn't going to feel guilty about refusing to shield her from reality. You're cold. You've always been like this. You care more about rules than people. Real family would help each other through hard times. I told her real family doesn't steal from each other, and then demand the victim pay for the damages. I loaded the last box, got in my car, and drove away. Didn't look back. My parents didn't call for 3 weeks. When mom finally reached out, it was to tell me things were getting worse. She asked if I could help. Not with money anymore, she said. Just with Kayla. Just to drop the charges. Said Kayla was spiraling. Not working. Not leaving her room. Not contributing anything to the household while consuming resources they couldn't afford. I told her that sucked. Didn't offer solutions. Didn't volunteer to fix it. She got frustrated. Why are you being so cold? I'm your mother, and I'm struggling. I told her I was sorry she was struggling. Genuinely was. But I also told her that Kayla was 28 years old and had been enabled by both of them for her entire life. Said this was the natural result of never making her face consequences. Said I wasn't going to jump back into the pit with them now that the fire was getting hot. She hung up on me. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Nicole. Same friend who'd sent me the crash photos. She wanted to give me a heads up that Kayla had been telling everyone a different version of events, saying I'd given her permission to take the car, saying I filed charges out of spite because she accidentally damaged my vehicle, saying the family turned against her because I manipulated them. She was making herself the victim. I thanked Nicole for letting me know. Then I did something petty but satisfying. I screenshotted her original messages to me from the night of the crash. The ones where she'd laid out exactly what happened. The party, the driving while exhausted, the crash, all of it with timestamps. She was building a narrative where she was innocent and I was the villain. She was recruiting flying monkeys, and I don't negotiate with propaganda. I dropped those receipts in a private family group chat with the extended relatives who'd been hearing Kayla's version. No commentary, no accusations, just the receipts. My phone exploded. Texts from aunts and uncles asking what was going on. From cousins who'd been told I was a monster. From my grandmother who said she'd always suspected Kayla was trouble, but everyone kept telling her she was imagining things. My parents were furious. Dad called me screaming about airing dirty laundry. Mom sent a long text about how I'd humiliated Kayla and damaged her reputation with the family. I didn't respond to any of it. 2 days later, Mom gave Kayla 30 days to move out. Then came the exile. Kayla bounced from friend to friend like a pinball with a credit problem. Nicole lasted 3 weeks before catching her trying to use her credit card online. Another friend gave her 5 days. An ex-boyfriend took her back for about a week before realizing nothing had changed. Extended family had heard the real story by then. Nobody wanted to be the next person whose stuff disappeared or whose trust got violated. The criminal case moved slowly. Kayla ended up with a plea deal, diversion program, mandatory classes, restitution payments to mom, community service hours that she complained about constantly. No jail time, but a record that would follow her if she stepped out of line again. She had check-ins with a probation officer, actual accountability for the first time in her life. She called me once during this period, late at night, voice raw from crying, the real kind this time, not the performance. She asked why I was doing this to her, asked what she had to do to make things right, said she was running out of options and places to stay, said she was scared. I told her I wasn't doing anything to her, said I was just not doing anything for her, said there was a difference, said she'd spent her whole life expecting other people to absorb the cost of her choices, and now she was learning what happened when that stopped. She said that was cruel. I told her maybe it was, told her I wasn't a saint, but I also told her I'd spent years watching her take things and break things and lose things while everyone made excuses. Said I'd watched her face 0 consequences for behavior that would have destroyed anyone else's life. Said maybe having to figure things out on her own for once wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was the first honest thing anyone had done for her. She hung up. After a few weeks of couch surfing and mandatory classes, Kayla got a job, part-time at some retail store doing inventory. She found a room to rent in a house with 3 other people. Not glamorous. Shared bathroom. Tiny closet. But it was something she was paying for herself. My parents reached out around Christmas. Asked if I'd come to dinner. Said they wanted to try to repair things. Said the family should be together for the holidays. I told them I'd think about it. I did think about it. For about 10 seconds. Then I texted back and said no. Said I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine while nothing had actually changed. Said, until they acknowledged what happened and stopped treating me like the problem, I didn't see the point in fake family harmony. Dad called me ungrateful. Mom cried. Same script. Same cast. Different price tag. I spent Christmas with friends instead. Drank hot chocolate. Watched bad movies. Didn't think about my family once. Fast forward 11 months. Almost a full year since the crash. I was settled into my apartment. My car had been fixed months ago and was running fine. Work was good. I'd gotten a promotion to senior claims specialist, bump in pay, more responsibility. Life was better than it had been when I lived under my parents' roof, constantly waiting for the next crisis Kayla would create. The legal stuff finally wrapped up around that time. Kayla's case had gone through the system. Diversion program completed, restitution payments ongoing, community service hours logged. She'd avoided jail, but just barely. The record would follow her for years. But that wasn't the interesting part. Dad got dragged into it. Turns out when you pressure someone into committing insurance fraud, and that someone reports it to the police, things get complicated. The detective handling Kayla's case had taken notes during our conversations. Detailed notes. About who said what, who pressured whom, who demanded false statements be made to an insurance company. Dad got called in for questioning. Twice. I wasn't there for the interviews, but I heard about them through the family grapevine. Apparently he showed up the first time thinking he could charm his way out of it. Deflection and excuses. Same playbook he'd used his whole life. Didn't work so well when there was a paper trail and recorded statements from his own son. The second interview he brought a lawyer. That's when reality started landing. He wasn't charged with anything in the end. Not enough evidence to prosecute, the DA decided. But the investigation stayed on file. His name was in the system now. And word got around. Small towns talk. Midwest suburbs talk even more. Someone at the police station knew someone who knew someone from Dad's office. Within weeks, half his workplace had heard some version of Dave tried to make his son commit insurance fraud to cover for his daughter. Not exactly the reputation he'd spent 30 years building. His boss called him in for a conversation about professional conduct. HR opened a file. Nothing actionable, but the kind of thing that follows you around when promotion season comes. The kind of thing people remember when they're deciding who to trust with client accounts and company resources. Dad's response? Blamed me. Obviously. He called me once, about 2 months after the investigation closed. Voice tight with that particular combination of rage and self-pity I'd grown up hearing whenever something went wrong in his life. You've ruined my reputation, my career, my marriage. Are you happy now? I told him I didn't ruin anything. Said he made choices and those choices had consequences. Said I just declined to participate in covering them up. You're not my son anymore. Told him that was fine by me. Hung up. Blocked his number. Mom filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The investigation had been the final straw. Not because Dad tried to pressure me into fraud, but because she'd found out he'd been secretly sending Kayla money the entire time. Hundreds of dollars a month, wired to accounts Mom didn't know existed. While she was struggling to make payments on a car that was scrap metal in a junkyard, Dad was funding Kayla's lifestyle behind her back. She found the bank statements doing taxes, months of transfers, lies stacked on top of lies. The divorce finalized 6 months after that. Mom got the house. Dad got a studio apartment across town and whatever was left of his professional reputation. Last I heard, he'd transferred to a different branch in a different city, starting over at 57 because he couldn't let his golden child face a single consequence without trying to rig the game. The financial damage never fully healed. Mom's still paying off that loan for the SUV Kayla totaled. Will be for another 3 years at least. She drives the same rattling sedan she bought after the crash. Hasn't spoken to Kayla since kicking her out. Hasn't spoken to Dad since the papers were signed. As for Kayla, last I heard through cousins, she's working retail somewhere, renting a room with strangers, still paying restitution every month. Whether she's actually changed or just learned to be more careful about who she steals from, couldn't tell you. Don't really care to find out either. Not my circus anymore. I spent last Christmas with friends, good people, the kind who don't take your stuff while you're sleeping or expect you to commit felonies on their behalf. We ordered pizza, watched bad movies, played cards until 2 a.m. I didn't think about my family once. My apartment is quiet. My keys stay on my dresser every night. Nobody touches them. Funny how simple life gets when you stop living with people who treat your belongings like communal property and your boundaries like suggestions. That empty driveway almost 2 years ago felt like the worst morning of my life. Turns out it was the morning I finally stopped being the family cleanup crew. They made the mess. They're still cleaning it up. I'm just over here living my life. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true. Today's story is about a guy who spent 5 years being someone's financial safety net, emotional anchor, and on-call vacation planner, all rolled into one. He booked a 2-week beach resort trip, dropped a $2,000 non-refundable deposit straight out of his savings, and then his girlfriend dumped him, admitted she'd been cheating, and casually assumed she was still going on that trip. As friends, obviously. What he did with those tickets is exactly why you're here today. Grab whatever you've got and settle in, because this one builds slowly and pays off beautifully. Let's get into it. We're better as friends, honestly, she assured me, so I agreed. Then she discovered friendship didn't include me covering her half of the vacation, especially not when I took someone else instead. My name's Alex and I'm 34. I work as an operations manager at a mid-sized consulting firm. Decent pay, steady work, the kind of job that doesn't make for exciting conversation at parties, but keeps the lights on and the savings account growing. I'm a planner by nature. I like order, I like reliability, and I've always believed that being the stable one in a relationship is a feature, not a flaw. That belief was about to get stress tested in a serious way. I met Jenna in college. She was a graphic design major with this electric, restless kind of energy. The type of person who had 4 plans going at once, and somehow made all of them sound like the most interesting thing in the world. She walked into a room and immediately became the center of it. Big laugh, big ideas, big dreams she talked about like they were already halfway done. I was completely hooked from the moment I met her, and I stayed hooked for longer than was probably good for me. We graduated and moved into a downtown apartment together. Nothing fancy, small kitchen, 1 bedroom, a view of the parking structure across the street, but it felt like the right kind of start. I went into it fully committed to making it work, which in practical terms meant being the one who held things steady while she built something of her own. Jenna was freelancing as a graphic designer. Building a client base from scratch is unpredictable work, and her income reflected that completely. Some months she'd land a big project and feel on top of the world. Other months she'd be picking up waitressing shifts and stress eating cereal for dinner. I didn't resent her for the inconsistency. I understood it. I picked up the slack without making it a thing, paid most of the rent and utilities, helped her put together a professional website and portfolio, worked overtime when she needed software or industry events she couldn't afford. I told her we were a team. Your success is our success. I meant every word of it. There's one night I think about more than any other from those early years. About 2 years into living together, she lost her biggest client without any warning. A long-term contract just evaporated. Bills were stacking, and she had nothing lined up. I came home after a 12-hour shift, still in my work clothes, and found her sitting on the couch in the dark. No TV, no music, just sitting there staring at nothing, looking completely hollowed out in a way that made my chest tighten the second I saw her. I didn't ask what happened. I sat down beside her, held her, and told her we'd figure it out together. That night, after she fell asleep, I transferred money from my personal emergency savings into our joint account to cover her share of the rent. She hadn't asked me to do it. She didn't even know until the next morning when she checked the balance. She wrapped her arms around me and called me her rock. Said she'd pay me back as soon as things picked up. That became the pattern. Her inconsistency, my backup fund, her promise to eventually square things up. I accepted it because I genuinely believed we were building towards something together. And in fairness, her work did pick up during certain stretches. There were periods of real momentum where she was booking clients consistently and feeling good about where things were heading. Those stretches made the harder ones feel worth it. Another memory that's been sitting with me since all of this ended, about 3.5 years in, she wanted to quit her waitressing shifts entirely and go fully freelance. She was terrified to do it without a financial cushion she didn't have. I told her I'd cover us for a few months while she built momentum. I dipped into my emergency fund for the second time, covered groceries and utilities, and her share of the rent while she pushed the freelance business forward. She made it work. Landed 2 solid ongoing clients and stopped worrying about the side income within about 4 months. She was so relieved, so grateful. Told me she couldn't have done it without me. I went to sleep that night feeling like I'd done something genuinely meaningful. Looking back now, I just funded the stability that let her grow comfortable enough to eventually decide I was boring. We talked about the future constantly. Marriage someday, a house when it made financial sense, what kind of life we wanted to build together down the road. I wasn't in a rush. I was just fully in it. The way you are when you've decided someone is your person and you've stopped questioning it. Looking back now with a clear head, I was carrying about 80% of the weight and calling it partnership. That's not entirely on her. I let that dynamic develop over years without ever naming it for what it was. About a year ago, she started talking about burning out. The freelance hustle had been grinding her down and she needed a real reset. Let's plan something big, she said. Something we've been saying we'd do since college but never actually pulled the trigger on. So I made it happen. I found a 2-week resort package at a beach destination that was genuinely stunning. White sand, blue water, the kind of place that looks like something out of a travel magazine. I put down the $2,000 non-refundable deposit from my savings, fully expecting she'd cover her half when her next client payment came in. The remaining balance wasn't due for several months. We had time. She was completely thrilled. Lit up like I hadn't seen in a while. Posted about the trip on social media that same day. The destination, the resort, heart emojis, the whole production. She wrote something like, "Can't wait to make memories with my favorite person." I remember smiling when I saw it. I was just happy she was happy. That happiness didn't last long. Hold on. Let me step in here. This is me, not the story. Before we move forward, I need you to clock something. This man pulled from his own emergency fund to cover her rent when she didn't even ask. He worked overtime so she could go to networking events. And now he's dropped $2,000 on a vacation she's barely contributing to. She's posting heart emojis online. He's balancing a spreadsheet. That's not a partnership. That's a sponsorship with a girlfriend title attached. And you know what she calls him later? Boring. No spark, no passion. We'll get there. Stay with me. Around the same time I booked the trip, something in the apartment started feeling different. It's hard to describe because it wasn't dramatic or sudden, more like a slow temperature drop, the kind you don't notice until you're already cold. Jenna started coming home later from work. Not by hours at first, just 30 or 40 minutes, then gradually more over time. Her phone was always face down on the counter when I walked into the kitchen. She'd be smiling at the screen and typing quickly, and the moment I got close, she'd set it down and change the subject. I told myself it was work stuff, a new client, a group chat with her design community, something that didn't involve me. I trusted her. I'd never had a reason not to. She started reposting things online that I noticed but didn't comment on. Quotes about craving adventure, memes about outgrowing comfortable routines, posts about needing someone who keeps life interesting. I'd see them scroll past in my feed and feel this low-grade unease I couldn't quite locate. But I kept talking myself out of it. People post random things. It doesn't mean anything. Then came the mentions of Mark, a co-worker of hers. Musician on the side, guitarist in some local band that played underground shows. She brought him up the way you'd mention anyone from work. Casually, in passing, like he was a completely normal thing to talk about. He'd planned a last-minute road trip and just went. Got backstage passes to some show through a contact. Always doing something, always in the middle of some project. She'd laugh when she talked about him. This easy, light laugh that I hadn't heard her use about anything involving me in a while. I noticed. I didn't say anything. She started canceling things I'd planned for us. A dinner reservation she'd been looking forward to, she'd text an hour before to say she was staying late with friends. A movie night at home, she'd cut it short and go to bed early. A weekend picnic I'd organized specifically because she said she wanted to get outside more. She rescheduled twice and then stopped mentioning it entirely. Our intimacy dried up over the course of a few months. She said she was tired, stressed about work. I gave her space because that felt like the right thing to do when someone says they need it. But the distance didn't shrink. If anything, it grew. There were evenings when I'd come home, cook dinner, put it on the table, and she'd eat with her phone beside her plate like I was background noise. I'd try to start a conversation and get one-word answers. Then she'd disappear into the bedroom saying she needed to unwind. I'd sit there at the table thinking about what I'd done wrong and coming up empty. I hadn't changed. I was exactly who I'd been for 5 years. That somehow made it worse. Privately, I was starting to question everything. Was I too stable? Too focused on building something steady when what she wanted was unpredictable? I started second-guessing qualities I'd always considered strengths: the planning, the consistency, the way I worked hard to make our life reliable and solid. I suggested we shake things up, maybe book a spontaneous weekend trip somewhere neither of us had been. She waved it off, said we were fine, said I was overthinking it. I was lying awake at 3 in the morning running through every possible explanation, so I'm not sure that qualifies as overthinking. But I stayed quiet. I'd turned down a promotion the previous year that would have required extended travel because I wanted to stay close to home. I'd pulled back on things I actually cared about: photography, long trail hikes, a reading habit I'd dropped completely, to keep my schedule open for us. I'd built my life around the assumption that this was where I was supposed to be, and now I was feeling it hollow out from the inside without understanding why. I kept telling myself it was a rough patch, that relationships go through these things and come out the other side. It wasn't a rough patch. The truth showed up on a Tuesday night in early fall. I got home earlier than usual and stopped at her favorite Thai place on the way. Same order we'd been doing since our first year together. I set the table, lit a candle, and sat there for a few minutes just hoping that a quiet dinner was all we needed to close whatever gap had been growing between us. She walked in around 8. Eyes on her phone, purse still over her shoulder, didn't register the table set up at first. I said hey and asked how her day was. She set her bag on the couch and let out a long breath. "Alex, we need to talk." I know what those words sound like when someone says them a certain way. My stomach dropped. I nodded and sat down. She paced for a moment, arms crossing and uncrossing, not making eye contact. Then she stopped, looked at me, and told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking about us. That she loved me but thought we were better as friends. That we'd grown apart, that she was craving something different, someone who could push her outside her comfort zone. I asked her calmly if there was someone else. She paused just long enough to answer before she opened her mouth. Then she nodded. Mark from work. They'd been spending time together, she said. Nothing serious yet, but he understood her in a way I didn't. He was spontaneous, always planning something, always alive. With me, she said, it was just work, home, repeat, same routine. She needed more than that. I pointed out that I had literally just booked a 2-week vacation specifically to break out of that routine. She rolled her eyes, said it wasn't really cheating because we'd basically been roommates for months anyway. Said she'd been hinting through those posts and I should have picked up on it sooner. Said I was too logical, too structured, too focused on planning and stability to ever make her feel truly excited. Mark had taken her to an underground show the previous weekend and it was incredible. I would have hated it. Too loud, too unplanned. She laughed a little when she said that. She reminded me of the one time I said skydiving sounded too risky. Said that was me, always playing it safe. Said she deserved someone who matched her energy. I sat there and let her keep going for a minute because at that point I was more curious than hurt. The full picture was assembling itself in real time. She went on about how Mark never overthought things, never needed a plan, never had a 5-step process for everything, which was apparently how she'd come to describe my general approach to life. She said she felt like she'd been living in a color-by-numbers painting for 2 years, when what she wanted was something raw and unpredictable. She actually said color by numbers. I remember that specifically because the irony of it hit me a few days later. She'd spent the last 2 years posting carefully curated couple content on social media, complete with matching aesthetics and thoughtful captions. And now spontaneity was the brand she was trying on. I leaned back and took it all in. The betrayal was one thing. The way she was framing it, like my reliability was the reason she cheated, like being dependable was a character flaw she'd been patiently enduring. That part cut differently. She wasn't just ending the relationship. She was rewriting 5 years of it in the span of 10 minutes. She said we could stay friends. We had history. Didn't have to make it messy. Could still grab coffee here and there. And then, and I want you to really absorb this next part, she said we should still go on the vacation together, as friends. Said it would be awkward to cancel at this point. Said she'd pay me back her half eventually. I sat there looking at her for a long moment. Then I said, "Okay." She blinked, like she expected me to fall apart, or argue, or beg her to reconsider. When I just sat there calm and said, "Okay," she actually commented on it. Said this was exactly why things wouldn't work between us. No emotion, no fight. Mark would have argued because he actually cared. I told her I cared. I just wasn't going to beg. I got up and went to the bedroom and packed an overnight bag. When I walked back through the living room with my duffel and my keys, she was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, almost looking disappointed that I wasn't going to give her a scene. She asked if I was really just leaving like that. I told her friends don't live together, grabbed my keys and walked out. She stood in the hallway, the door closed behind me. I drove to my buddy Nate's place and crashed on his couch. Pause for a second, because I need to talk about what just happened. She cheated, told him to his face, explained in detail that it was because he was boring and a guy named Mark made her feel alive, and then asked if she could still go on the vacation he paid for, as friends. And his response was to say, "Okay, pack one bag," and walk out without raising his voice. No begging, no blow-up, no speech at the door. She stood in that hallway waiting for a scene and got complete silence. That composure is rarer than people think, and 100 times more effective than yelling. Keep going. It gets better. That first night at Nate's was rough. He had a pull-out couch that was about 3 inches too short for my legs, and I lay there staring at the ceiling replaying 5 years in a loop. Not just the conversation, all of it. The emergency fund transfers, the overtime shifts, the promotion I passed on, the photography gear sitting in a bag I hadn't touched in 2 years, the trail hikes I'd put off indefinitely, everything I'd quietly arranged around making our life work, stacked up in my head at once while I stared at a water stain and tried to process the fact that none of it had mattered in the end. She'd traded 5 years of that for a guy who took her to a loud show and called it spontaneous. But I didn't text her, didn't call, just let it sit. The unfairness was the hardest part to move through. She cheated, admitted it straight to my face, reframed the whole thing so I looked like the cause of it, and then asked about the vacation deposit in the same conversation. But I'd been around long enough to know that falling apart in the direction of someone who just disrespected you is the worst possible use of your energy. Nate was solid about the whole thing. He let me know that same night that she was showing her true colors and I deserved better, and he said it without making a production of it. He kept the coffee stocked and gave me the couch for as long as I needed without pressure. I took a few days off work to get my head straight, started running again. Real runs, hard ones, early in the morning before anyone else was out. The physical reset helped more than I expected. There's something about grinding through a 5-mile run at 6 in the morning that puts a pretty sharp edge on what actually matters and what doesn't. I went back to the gym and actually pushed myself, instead of going through the motions. I started writing things down at night, which felt slightly ridiculous, but helped more than I expected. Every red flag I'd explained away, every comparison she'd made, every vague post I'd convinced myself meant nothing, all of it out of my head and onto paper, where I could actually look at it clearly. The list got long faster than I thought it would. On the practical side, I moved quietly and without drama. Emailed the landlord about ending the lease early, kept the reason brief. Had utilities transferred out of my name. Went to the bank and withdrew my half of the joint account and closed it the same day. Found a 1-bedroom apartment within a few weeks. Fully mine, nothing shared, no joint, anything attached to it. The vacation deposit was gone. I knew that. Non-refundable meant non-refundable, and I wasn't going to lose sleep over $2,000 I'd already written off mentally. But the remaining balance wasn't due for a couple more months. And Jenna had never actually paid her half. Always the next paycheck. Always soon. I'll get you back. I didn't remind her. I just filed that fact away quietly. I unblocked her on one app to keep a line open in case anything came up related to the lease or the joint account. Practical stuff only. Otherwise, silence. I picked up my camera for the first time in close to 2 years. Started reading the sci-fi novels I'd been meaning to get to forever. Took a solo trail hike one Saturday morning that I'd wanted to do for ages, but had always put off because she wasn't into hiking. Standing on that trail with nothing around me but wind and distance and my own thoughts, I felt something start to loosen. It wasn't happiness exactly, more like the specific relief of realizing you've been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and you've only just noticed because you finally set it down. Work picked up around the same time. I poured the extra energy into a major project that had been sitting on the back burner for months, and my manager called me out in front of the whole team. Said I'd been on fire lately. That small moment of recognition, earned, not handed to me, not something I'd had to beg for, hit differently after years of looking for that same feeling in a place that kept dimming it. I started seeing someone. Nothing I planned, just naturally. I met a woman named Laura at a professional event, introduced through a mutual colleague. She was a teacher. Grounded, sharp, easy to be around. She laughed at my dry humor without making it weird. We got coffee a few times, no pressure or expectation on either end. It felt like finding parts of myself that had been quietly put in storage. The unfairness still surfaced sometimes at night. But I didn't live in it. I let the silence do its work. About a month after the breakup, the silence started talking back. Okay, time out. Let me set the table for what's coming. While this guy is out here running trails and quietly rebuilding everything, Captain Spontaneous is self-destructing in real time. The musician who was so exciting, always planning adventures, ghosted her inside of a month. Turns out spontaneous also means not planning to stick around. Apparently, it was a whole pattern with this guy. She wasn't the first. She'd also quit her part-time job expecting to travel with him. Now freelancing is her only income, and she's scaring off clients with dramatic posts online. This is what trading stability for vibes looks like on paper. I started hearing updates through mutual connections, not because I asked, just things that come up when people talk. Mark had ghosted her after a few weeks. Turned out he was seeing multiple women at the same time, which nobody in our circle was shocked by. A few people who knew him said it was standard behavior for him, that he had a whole pattern of this, and that Jenna wasn't the first woman who'd made a significant life change based on his interest only to watch him disappear. That information was not exactly comforting, but it did clarify some things. She'd walked away from her waitressing shifts right around the same time she got involved with him, expecting to travel and spend time together, which left freelancing as her only income exactly when she could least afford for it to be unstable. Then, she'd gone online during the fallout and started posting vague, dramatic content, rants about fake people, cryptic things about moving on, and recognizing who actually valued you. The kind of content that signals to potential clients that you're in the middle of a personal crisis. Professional image matters in freelance work. People don't hire someone whose public profile reads like a slow-motion spiral. Friends began quietly stepping back. Not a dramatic falling out, just the natural dispersal that happens when someone becomes consistently exhausting to be around. The first message came about 5 weeks after the breakup. I was between sets at the gym when I checked my phone and found a text from Jenna. Casual tone, like we were old friends who'd just fallen out of touch. Asked how I'd been. Said she missed chatting and that we should grab coffee sometime. And then, almost like a footnote at the end, she brought up the vacation deposit. Said she could Venmo me her half soon and we shouldn't let it go to waste. Not one word of apology. Not a single acknowledgement of what actually happened between us. Just a friendly check-in with a financial request tacked onto the end. I replied twice, told her there was no need, then told her to handle her own. She responded almost immediately, said I was being cold, said friends help each other out, said she couldn't afford to lose that money right now. I didn't answer. I blocked the number. A few days later, her mom called, left a voicemail. I recognized her voice immediately. She said Jenna had told her what happened, and that we were so good together, and that I should be the bigger person and reach out. She used the phrase, family sticks together, like Jenna and I had been family, or like calling yourself a close friend of an ex automatically enrolls you in the network. I deleted the voicemail without responding. Then Tina, Jenna's best friend, the type who had been enthusiastically enabling her drama for years, sent me a text. Said I was being cold, said Jenna was hurting, said the cheating quote-unquote just happened, and at least I should hear her out about the trip because she needed a break. I replied once. Told her it wasn't my problem. Then I blocked Tina too. About a week after that, a call came in from an unfamiliar number while I was at my desk. I let it go to voicemail, almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity got the better of me. It was Jenna, new number, different voice than I'd heard in that apartment. Softer, cracking at the edges. She said, okay, I was right. She was wrong. Mark had turned out to be a jerk who used her and disappeared. She was sorry for how she'd ended things. She said she missed me. And then, in almost the same breath, she mentioned she was 3 weeks behind on rent and that freelancing wasn't paying, and she asked if I could help her out. As a friend. She'd pay me back. Promise. I didn't call back. Then she came to my office. I was heading out for lunch, stepping off the elevator, when I saw her standing in the lobby. She looked completely different from the confident, slightly smug woman who'd laughed at the Thai food going cold on the table. Frazzled. Tired in a way that sat in her face. Her hair wasn't done, her eyes were puffy, and she was watching the elevator bank like she wasn't sure what she was going to say the second she saw me. She rushed toward me the moment I walked out. I stopped, kept my face neutral and my voice flat, asked her what was going on. She said she was sorry. For all of it. The cheating. The way she'd handled the conversation. The things she'd said. Mark had turned out to be volatile. Things got bad before they ended. And now she was alone, broke, behind on rent. The friends she'd been venting to online had quietly stopped picking up. She looked at me like she was putting something together for the first time, and said I was always the one who actually showed up. She asked if we could try again, or at minimum, if she could come to me as a real friend when she needed support. I told her I was genuinely sorry about what happened with Mark. Then I told her the chapter was closed. Her expression shifted. The softness folded back, and something sharper moved in underneath it. She straightened up and said I owed her. After all those years she'd put up with my boring routine, she said. After sticking around that long, the least I could do was cover her half of the trip. There it was. I said friends don't cheat and then demand money. She snapped, called me petty, said Mark was right, I was spineless. No wonder she left. I turned around and said goodbye. She raised her voice, told me I'd regret this, told me I was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me. Security walked her out while I went back upstairs, heated up my lunch at the office microwave, and ate at my desk in complete peace. That encounter had the strange effect of closing something off inside me that had still been slightly open. Up until that moment, there had been a small part of me, the part that spent 5 years believing in her, the part that sat next to her in the dark when she lost her biggest client, that had been waiting for a version of her that was genuinely sorry. The office visit made it clear that version wasn't coming. She wasn't there to apologize. She was there because her backup plan had failed, and I was the next option on the list. Once I saw that clearly, there was nothing left to feel conflicted about. Wait, let me make sure this lands properly. She walked into his workplace, a building she knew because she'd been there during better times, showed up unannounced with a carefully arranged sob story, and the second he didn't reach for his wallet, she pivoted straight to, "You owe me for tolerating your boring routine." That's not remorse. That's a vending machine that ran out of product and started kicking you. The audacity of framing 5 years of being financially supported as a hardship she nobly endured. And this man stood there, said goodbye, went back upstairs, and ate lunch. Absolutely no notes. Carry on. The remaining vacation balance came due about 2 months after that. I paid it in full. For 2 people. Just not the 2 people it was originally booked for. By then, Laura and I had developed into something real. Not just occasional coffee, actual time together. Weekend hikes where neither of us checked our phones, long dinners that ran late, conversations that didn't have any hidden edges or subtle digs buried underneath them. She was easy to be around in a way I'd honestly forgotten was possible. She thought my planning instinct was useful, not a personality defect. She appreciated that I followed through on things. She had her own life, her own goals, her own sense of direction. And she wasn't looking for someone to prop her up financially or emotionally. She just wanted good company. When I brought up the trip one evening, told her the whole backstory, what it was originally supposed to be and what it had turned into, she just listened without making it a production. No drama, no overthinking it. When I asked if she wanted to come, she smiled. She said she'd love that. No conditions, no negotiation. No, I'll get you back eventually. Just straightforward excitement about going somewhere beautiful with someone she actually wanted to spend time with. We booked the flights, packed the bags, started counting down the days. The final scene played out at the airport on the morning we left. We were early, bags checked, coffees in hand, working our way toward the gate. I spotted Jenna before she saw me. She was standing near the check-in counters with a carry-on, alone, looking worn in a way that was hard to miss even from across the terminal. She wasn't dressed the way she used to dress when she wanted to make an impression. No effort in it. Just someone who looked like they'd been through a few hard months and hadn't quite landed yet. She must have seen something on social media, or heard through someone in our old social circle that I was still going on the trip. I don't know exactly how she found out, but she was there. She locked eyes with me and came straight over. Laura felt the shift in the air before I said a word. She moved slightly closer without making anything of it. Jenna looked at Laura, then at me, asked if we could speak alone for a moment. I shook my head. She started again, slower. Said Mark had left her in real financial debt. Said she'd had to borrow money from her mom just to cover groceries. Said the friends she'd been venting to online had stopped answering. Then she looked at me with this expression like she was genuinely seeing something clearly for the first time. Said she'd been blind. Said I was stable and kind, and she'd traded something real for something that turned out to be completely empty. Said she'd changed and wanted a chance to start over. And then she asked if she could come on the trip. As a friend. Said she'd sleep on the couch if she had to. Just needed the escape. There were a few people from our old social circle nearby, getting coffee before their gate. I'd noticed them when we came in. They were pretending not to watch. I said her name once. Kept my voice even. Told her the chapter was closed. Said I'd built something new. Better situation at work. Better people around me. The trip was mine and Laura's. She said we'd planned it together. That I couldn't just replace her. I reminded her that she replaced me first. Told me I was boring. No spark. No passion. She said it herself. Her face crumbled. She said she knew she was wrong. Said she was sorry. Said please don't leave her like this. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not the guilt she was probably hoping for. Just a flat, complete nothing. The kind that only shows up after you've already moved through every other emotion and come out the other side. I told her her choices brought her to this point. Mine were taking me somewhere else. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Said after everything, I at least owed her a second chance. Laura touched my arm gently. Time to go, she said. I looked at Jenna one last time. The person standing in front of me didn't really resemble the woman I'd fallen for in college. That version of her had been ambitious and alive and full of possibility. This version was running on desperation and entitlement, and the belief that our history gave her a permanent claim on my patience. Those are two very different things, and I'd finally stopped confusing them. I told her to take care of herself. Told her not to contact me again. She called after us as we walked toward the gate that I'd be miserable, that Laura was a rebound, that I'd regret this. Every word landed somewhere behind me and just stayed there. One of the guys from our old circle, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, caught my eye as we passed. He gave me a slow nod, the kind that says everything without needing a single word attached to it. We boarded the plane. 2 weeks later, I was on a beach with good food in my hand and nothing pressing on my mind. I know Jenna eventually saw the photos because a mutual friend mentioned it in passing later. I didn't feel vindicated by that. Didn't feel much of anything about it, actually. The satisfaction I had was quiet and personal. The kind you don't need to announce to anyone or prove to anyone. It was just mine. 5 years. A lot of overtime, a lot of past promotions, a lot of emergency fund transfers I never asked for back. And all of it led to boarding a plane without her, landing somewhere beautiful, and feeling completely at ease with how every single piece of it played out. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. And don't let anyone call your stability boring for so long that you start to believe them. So Reddit, what would you have done at the airport? Would you have stopped and talked to her, or walked straight past without breaking stride? Drop it in the comments. Look, nobody's calling this guy perfect. He stayed too long, ignored flags that were pretty hard to miss by the end, and carried the weight of 2 people on one salary for years without naming what that dynamic actually was. But when it fell apart, he didn't beg. He didn't blow up. He handled the mess quietly, rebuilt something better, and took the trip he worked for with someone who genuinely wanted to be there. That's not revenge. That's just what happens when you stop explaining yourself to people who already decided you're boring. Drop your take in the comments and subscribe if you're not already here. The next story's worth showing up for.